wait full 10 seconds because, well, YouTube. All right, everybody, it's Education by Ed, and it is currently February 25th, 2018, and we're not going to have an intro because Ed's got a lot of information he wants out, so take it away, Ed.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight and being part of our educational process that we're doing, because I still learn, and what I learn I pass on to others so we could all learn how to deal with our corporation courts, and knowing what an Article 1 and an Article 3 court is. And the other point is knowing how to testify in front of the House and Senate hearings. And this is the one thing that you want to do is to, if you can, go there and ask them. We're going to have a template coming up here on for people to serve their senators and congressmen and their House of Representatives, to ask them who owns the child. The Legislative Council? Does the executive branch? Or the legal? So this is the one thing that people need to learn, what our court system is compared to when they go in and they want to argue about, it's like a conversation arguing with a judge on your rights to travel. Okay, we all know that we have a legal, lawful right to travel. Okay, but the one point that gets to me when I bring this up to people, and I know other people have, because I've done my affidavits, filed them, been through all that. And so, and like I said, we want to do this petition, or it's basically going to be a public record request for who owns the children, executive, legislative, or judicial. And so I haven't perfected it. I've got it out right now. We're going to do some proofing on it to double check a few things, because I've done this in such a fashion where, Section 1 is judicial. Who owns your child? Does the court system, Article 1 court system, own your child? Number 2, legislative council. Do the House and Senate members own your child of the state corporation? Or number 3, executive branch. Does the president and the executive branch own your child? And then 4th, it's we the people, aka the parents, the lawful parents, who commence making love and create a parasite, and then all of a sudden that grows into a life form or life structure when it's born, or when it's delivered, or however you want to say it. I don't want to use the word birth because we're not birthing a ship, and born could be considered legally that too. It just depends on the way it's taken, but we're going to get this one out, and so it is important once we get this out for people to take this to the Legislative Council or email it, or preferably not email it, to tell you the truth. You want to register and certify it, or if you have the ability to go to the House and Senate of your state, take it with you and ask them to certify a copy of who owns the child. Now you have actual evidence when you go to court, when they kidnap or steal your kid for human trafficking, or, for their personal financial gain of the state corporations, and including the funding under Article 4 of the Social Security Act that William Jefferson Clinton put in place. So these are very apparent things, and we'll be doing one for right of travel too eventually. And it's getting the stuff out so that way you know how to discuss these circumstances with your public servants. Now, I'm going to be getting up here on the YouTube channel here pretty soon on Oregon Trackers. I'm going to put up the links in the message structure dealing with that so people can see. I've gone up there and I've confronted the House and Senate members personally in public testimony when they were trying to basically take me out. And the guy who's running the insurance fund for the state of Oregon now, Rob Bavette, was the one who was the district attorney at the time when they kidnapped and held me for ransom for videotaping an unlawful warrant or illegal warrant that was served on a woman, and we got the video up on YouTube on that. So the cop sat there, and I came up with my video camera and going, you can't serve a warrant like that. It's illegal, number one. Number two, and then he goes, well, then I'm just going to bow over, and he bowed and put it on the ground, and he goes, well, I'm going to arrest you for littering if you don't pick it up. And I said, nah, you can't do that, because number one, paper is a biodegradable product, and by even Oregon state law, paper and food products are not basically trash, plastic, or anything else. So you can't go after and attack somebody that way, and this is on the YouTube video. Ed Johnson kidnapped City of Toledo, and we have several of them up there. And the thing is that they do this stuff for personal financial gain, and when you go into these courts, this is how they get away with it under the Article 1 courts of the British system compared to an Article 3 of your Constitution court. And that is the point that you've got to start doing. We're getting more and more education material on this to put out so people can actually know the separation, and when you're filing into a court structure, you get to know what court you're really filing in compared to what people think they are filing in. And that is the one thing that I just got a message from a lady, I'm trying to pull it up here on the internet right now, that she just got a hearing by Florida going after, this is great, I just love this. I don't know if she's joined us. I invited her to join us, and if she does, then we'll get her on when we open up the floor here to, for everybody to bring their knowledge to the table. But I just got this 115th Congress of the United States of America under 28 USC code 22012202 and 2415. They got her versus the state of Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and Kentucky, and it's dealing with family courts, dealing with the way they kidnap kids and stuff, the way I think, or the way I'm sort of putting this together while going through this. And that is the point that we need to bring this up, so when people got these hearings, is knowing how to address your public servants when you go in. Because you have to realize that these people are human, even though that they technically don't act it. And I don't believe they're human anyways, because they get there so long that they forget what the structure of life is really all about. They do that. And that's the one thing that they really do, that people forget how the court systems work, or they don't know the court systems. Because when you go into a court, you're asking them, basically you're pleading to these men or women who are acting the black robe judges that are domestic terrorists. You're pleading with them to, you know the law. Well, of course they know the law, but they don't care about the law. They care about how much money they're bringing in for their own personal and financial gain, how much they're bringing into the corporation, family courts, traffic tickets, that type of stuff. And that's all they care about. They don't care about you. And as soon as people comprehend that these judges and attorneys and clerks do not care about you, they don't love you, they don't want you in your life, all they want is your money, your home, your assets. Their job is to rape, rob, and pillage, and that's part of the structure. And that is the one thing that you need to recommend going to your county clerk and asking them to certify the oath that they have on file for that judge. Get it certified. And don't argue with them about what oath it is. You get to learn what the oaths are, and we'll go over that another show. But you want to get a copy of that oath so that way you have evidence of either they took the right oath or a criminal oath. So you want evidence to go file on that man or woman. But going through and learning how to file, that's another one. And I think we have it up there. We got a structure on how to sue a judge, too. Because judges are not immune for lawsuits. They're only immune from lawsuits if you didn't speak against their structure. At first, you got to, challenge jurisdictions. You have to question their ability of what they're doing in that courtroom. And that comes down to your responsibility. And, we're going to get into that because we got a lot of people out there on Facebook and in the internet that claim to be family advocates, attorneys and all this stuff. And I've watched this for years. How people, talk people into sending them money. And then they talk them into sending them money, and then they never do anything. And they take advantage of people. I mean, and I'll push, I'm not used to pushing somebody else's stuff, but there's a guy named John Anderson on Facebook who does his Stolen Talk Show, and he's got a lot of interesting stuff he brings out on people on his show. The guy does his research on the people. So I recommend that, and I have that posted on the 4 websites, Recall Cape Brown, the United States for America, Elected in Public, United States for America Republic, Elected in Public Service Oversights, also 2 on the Civil War, 1866 Lawful Bloodline Americans, and you can't forget New Oregon Trackers. So that video is on those 4 Facebook sites. I do encourage people to watch them. I do, the whole point is education ourselves of who is conning who. And who is actually doing something productively. And that is the point. You've got to know who, what is doing the stuff productively. And there's a lot of people out there that are just conning people, taking money from them, not getting anything done. So it's really disturbing. And so that's why when you need to fight your battles, I suggest people going up to the Oregon State House and Senate or your state senators and ask them to certify a copy of your request. And that's very simple. You want to get it certified. And once you get those things certified, now you've got evidence. And that's what you want, is the evidence on these public servants that are doing this stuff, literally. Because without evidence, you have no standing. And that's the point that people have got to wake up. I mean, there's a lot of people that are, doing talk shows associated with the Bundys. And like I said, watch out who's asking for money. Watch out who these people are doing. Because if you're not paying attention and being scammed, and a lot of people are being scammed, and it's sad the way this goes. It really is totally sad that we get caught up in these scams that are going on with people who take people's emotions and they turn it into their financial gain. And it is disturbing. So when you watch these things happen, and that was the one thing, is that to know how, when you go out and talk to your public servants, do it at a public meeting, bring your request, ask them to certify it right there in a public meeting. They have a clerk right there that can certify it in every meeting. So when you ask to have it certified, now you have actual proof that either who owns the child, who has the right to travel, who has the right to hunt and fish without asking permission from your public servants. And that is the most important thing, that you need to find the points of these things out and bring them out to the people. It's your responsibility to bring this out, to protect yourself. Because if you don't protect yourself, nobody else is going to protect you. The courts ain't going to protect you. Because the courts, like I said, they don't work for you. They don't want nothing to do with you. They're not your friends. They don't believe in what you're doing. Because you're taking from them out of their pocket. And that's the way they actually look at that. So do your senators and congressmen. Because when you realize when these men and women run for office and how much money these people make in donations or gifts, whatever you want to call it, these people are really making a lot of money off of you. And that's what I'm saying. Go get it certified, registered certified. And then that way, when you go in to a court setting, now you have evidence to defend yourself beside an affidavit. Because some judges honor certain things, a lot of judges don't. They laugh at you and they make a mockery out of you in their courtroom. And that's why I always suggest I never cross the bar. And I mean, I've been in the audience in the courtroom many times, and they go, well, you cross the bar. I don't trust the judge. And I don't expect any of you to trust the judge, because the minute you cross that bar, it doesn't matter what he says, because judges lie. They get paid to lie, like police officers. And you can even type that in the Supreme Court decisions, because they've even got that. The Ninth Circuit Court even put a Supreme Court decision up that says before a child can be taken into custody, it has to have a warrant done. And if there ain't no warrant for a child to be taken into custody, it cannot be kidnapped and held for ransom. And that is the point, that you've got to look at how these men really do this stuff and how they reverse and trick us, because they have these attorneys write this stuff up that seems logical, seems reasonable, but then you realize that you got hornswoggled into another circumstance. And it sounds good when some of these people talk to you. They're very convincing, and they talk you right into the whole structure of their game, their racketeering. And it's like Article 7 even says, suits in common law, where the value of controversy shall not exceed $20. The right of a jury trial by jury, shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court in the United States. So, I mean, if a jury releases you and say you're not guilty, like some things that the Bundys are going through in the Hammonds, and now they're trying to retry it, and they're asking permission from the judge to retry the case, they can't do it. And that's where these people have got to realize, to go to these senators and congressmen and make it public record and bring the evidence forward. But they're not bringing the evidence forward. So that's the point, that when people don't do this and go to their public servants and make a public record, and the one thing is to make sure that a whole bunch of people get out there in one circumstances, go to the Capitol at once. That was recommended earlier today, that it is recommended that everybody take a trip to the Capitol and sit down and go through it in front of the Senate and House, demand our rights, demand how they're going to be doing our public service. And when we do that, we want to get the stuff certified. We want to make sure it's recorded record. And I'm going to be, as soon as I get my site here, I'm going to start posting the stuff that I've been doing where I testified at the Oregon State House and Capitol, dealing with this public servant who went after me. It ain't the first time this has happened, and that's where I try to get people to realize that when these men and women do this stuff and go after you for personal and financial gain, really, that's what they do, is they go after you for personal and financial gain. And that includes, like I said, I'm repeating myself too, but I wanted to get you guys to comprehend, the lawyers, the senators, congressmen, they all do it. They know the procedure on this stuff. They know what they are doing. And if you don't believe that, these congressmen and senators and elected officials, they go through program classes, programming them how to be manipulative, to manipulate you. They actually go through classes to do this. And that's the sad part, is people just don't want to believe that, people are this evil. But they are. And, I mean, you've got to watch how people do things, how they're conning people out of their structure, their money, their finances. Because, like I said, we got a lot of people out there that are offering help out there on the Internet. And I've dealt with some of these people over time, and I've nailed them on their fraud. I've even been on their own talk shows and nailed them on their own talk shows with their fraud. Live on their own talk shows. And they sure didn't like that one. But we've got to start figuring out who's telling the truth, who's being honest with us, and who's working with us, so that way we have freedom. And that's the whole point. We're going for our freedom and our children's freedom. So that is the one point that you have to remember, that it's your responsibility on your freedom. The public servants don't care. And I watch people all the time that go back and forth in this stuff, and they keep getting more and more deeper in trouble. And they go and believing in certain structures. And some of these people that are out there, they charge them money. They get them into contracts with lawyers and different structure. And that is the one thing that people's got to realize. Some of these people actually have you sign a release, so that way you can't sue them. So you cannot go after them. And that is what they want you to do, so that way they can sit there and go on Facebook or YouTube and telling people, well, we saved this man and woman, we did this, we did that. And it's like, it's sad because you watch these people that are claiming that, oh, they're doing this and they're broke and they don't have money and they're doing this to help you. And a lot of these people ain't there to help you. That's a fact. I know that. I watch it. I witness this stuff. And it's very disturbing when people sit there and go along with this stuff. And then when they go out and they start figuring out who screwed them over, and then when you try to go back after them, they're out slandering you publicly. And then people don't want to read the truth because, you know, it's like slander. When people slander, everybody wants to jump on that bandwagon because it's sad because people do that. And I know I've had that happen to me. So that's why I'm saying when you go to these the legislative council and you ask them to put this stuff in writing, and that is the whole point, is make them put it in writing, get it certified. Now you have factual evidence. It's not hearsay anymore, because these men and women who run the police department, who control the circumstances of the elected and public servants, they control it. So when they're controlling this stuff, then that way you have a right to speak out. You have a right to bring this stuff forward in structure with their evidence. Now you have them saying it, not you saying it. And that is the biggest part, is realizing, let them speak on it. That way you don't need to speak on it. And once you have them speaking on these issues and bringing these issues out, then that way it's not you. That way it's them. And so now it becomes a liability for them, because they're not going to go after, a cop ain't going to go after a senator or a congressman. They ain't that stupid. And that's the one thing that people need to realize, that when you have their evidence in your hand, you win. They're not going to go after you because you have their evidence. So that's the one thing that, you know, getting this stuff certified, registered copy, all this stuff is evidence for you to have in your arsenal to protect yourself. And that is where you need to start figuring out how our court system works, comprehending the court system through the senators and House representatives or congressmen. And once you start comprehending how these things work and what they do to us, it becomes much easier, because then when you do this and you go through the proper channels, like going up and testifying with these meetings and bringing this stuff out, then that way you're winning. That is the point of how you win, by their administrative rules that they put in writing, stating that now you have a case. And a cop ain't going to go through that. And if you go even to a city court, they're not going to go through that, because they're not going to put themselves in liability. And that's the one thing that people have to realize, how these men and women put themselves in liability. And you have to realize that when they put themselves in liability, you win, because a judge is not going to go against that, because in that way a judge knows that they are liable as well. So it's bringing the facts out on these issues to bring it forward, so that way you have the evidence laid out. You want the evidence to be there speaking for you. You want them to speak for you. It's like another point, I have another gentleman that brings up a good point to me. Seeing that they're your representatives, ask them to go to court for you. Let them go represent you in court. And they're going to go, what do you mean? Well, isn't that your job? You're my representative. They say by, birth certificate record, you are my representative, so you're supposed to represent me in these issues. You see, it comes out to be so simple how a lot of this stuff is brought to the table. And once you start realizing how simple this stuff is brought to the table, it just becomes so much easier for everybody involved, including yourself, to have the right evidence when you go to court. And I mean, and I've done this myself, where I'm still learning a lot of stuff, and that's why I bring it to the table. And we're not sitting out there and asking you to, sell your money out to us. If anybody would like to help, we can help keeping the website up and electricity going. That's primarily it, and the phone. That's how we bring it out. But we're not sitting out there forcing this out and bringing this out to people like a lot of these people are doing, so that way they're giving you guilt complexes to do that. Well, I'm disabled. I scrump and save. I barely make it, barely. And, I have to juggle my bills around. My associate, we have to juggle our bills around. So it's one of those things that, we have to do this. So, but we've dealt with it in life, and it's hard. We know how difficult it is when you don't have resources. We know how difficult life is when it really comes down to it on these structures. We know this, but we're trying to make it easier for our knowledge. And so this way, when you go to a Senate meeting, you walk in, and when you leave that Senate or House meeting after your testimony, you want to leave with evidence in your hand that clarifies what you have. You want to walk away with evidence in your hand that says, hey, now I can sit there and do this. I have evidence stating this. So when you have evidence in your hand that is legally can be used in their administrative rules, now you have evidence that they're not going to go against. See, that's the one thing. Once you have evidence by their certification, once they certify it, that's basically a signature basically of a judge in a court case when it really comes down to it, because you use it that way. And you have to use it that way. Because if you don't use it that way, how do you expect to win your cases? How do you expect to have your rights to travel done when we're working on something like that coming up? Because I have a deal that I got from Dexter Johnson, the legislative council in the state of Oregon, where he says that driving is a commercial structure. We know that, but then he writes in the commentary is that the legislators have the official decision on that. Okay, well, in the state of Oregon, I got that. So now I want to go after my legislators and ask them to put it in writing. Who has the right? Do I or do they? That is the one thing that you want to know, if you have the right or they. And then that way you get to know how to go defend yourself in these court cases. Once you comprehend how to defend yourself by using their words, their structure, their motivation, their examples, then this way you know how to beat them at their own administrative courts. Because Article I courts are administrative courts. They are not Constitution courts. That is the one thing that people have got to comprehend, that these are not Constitution courts. And once you get that figured out, that when you go to these courts, and everybody goes, and I've talked to many people that go in and they go into court and they bring up, this evidence and that evidence, and the judge sits there and tells you, well, that doesn't matter. What are you talking about? What are you trying to bring that in this courtroom for? That doesn't matter in this courtroom. And then you're going, well, here's the law. And the judge will tell you, well, that's not my law, because you're going into an Article I court. You're not going into an Article III court. And that's the whole point of knowing how these things work, to make them and bring them out in front of them with their own evidence, their own administration rules. And once you start knowing how to do that one, oh my God, it becomes so simple. It becomes really simple on how to win your court case. Because when it really comes down to it, it really is simple when you start figuring this out, how simple it is to basically win your court case. And I'm still learning this myself. And I'm passing my knowledge on to you, what I learned, and I got others that will do the same thing, and it's getting it out so that way we get to know the truth. And once you comprehend the truth, this is what makes it easier in life for all of us. When it really comes down to it, it makes it easier for all of us. And like I said, we got people that I talk to quite frequently that have children that are sitting down with some of these videos with their children and educating their children with the stuff. They're bringing it out and educating their children as the kids, 5, 10, 7, 15 years old, and they're watching the videos with them. Sit down and watch the stuff. I recommend you watch Senate and House public hearing meetings so you get to know what is going on in the public employees meetings. Because once you start sitting down, you start watching how these men and women just pass things down. Just pass it down. And like this one court decision, or one Senate bill that Kate Brown just had one of her gun bills passed. So she just had one of her gun bills passed. So and it was a 16 to 13 vote. Well, by the Constitution, they can't pass anything without 2/3 of the vote of the entire Congress or the entire House and Senate. And so they're getting away with this because administratively they've changed some of the administrative rules in the court systems, and they call it a democracy. Like in 2000, the state of Oregon changed the Constitution so that way the lawyers own your land in Oregon. And then that way they own your land is what they're claiming, which they don't, but you have to fight that, which I'm putting together something on that myself. Because they're saying they own your land. And then they changed the Constitution of Oregon and stated Oregon is not a republic, it's a democracy. And remember, democracy comes from England. The Queen of England and all this stuff, these are not our friends. They don't want you in this country to have freedom. Right now we're dealing with the shootings that have gone on in this country. Some of the shootings we know have been masqueraded. They're not real. Some have been coming out that possibly could be real. I mean, it's really disgusting when you're sitting there and you're starting to read the news reports why the sheriff in Florida resigned because they were standing outside the door apparently when the guy was shooting everybody. They were too afraid to go in. Or they allowed the murders to happen for job security. Well, that way they have more counseling for the children in school because some of the schools in the country passed counselor bills so that way they could have counselors run your children's life in the schools. And the state of Oregon just passed, and I'm working on this one, I put a letter to the editor out. They passed an administrative rule that says if your children is not vaccinated, your child can't go to school in Oregon. Well, I'm putting a letter together on that here. I'll have that sent out to all the media here by the end of the week because I want to nail that one because I believe all kids should be homeschooled. And then they're going to try to say, well, if you don't have your kid in school, we could arrest you for it, and they cannot. I can prove that one. Homeschooling is lawful and legal. We homeschool. When I was in a relationship, we homeschooled her kids. They can't sit there and tell you that you don't have a right. But the one thing they don't want you to know by administrative rules, they have to pay someone to educate your child. So if you're educating your child yourself, that means they have to pay you. What a concept. What a reality point. These are things that when you start looking at how the life comes across and you read their administrative rules, it becomes very plainly in English what their responsibility is to you. And once you get that point down and you know that you can file and get paid to be the kid's teacher, they're going to fight you on that because they don't want that money out of their budget. They don't want you to know that you have these rights to, be paid for your own children. I don't recommend it, to tell you the truth, because then that way they want you to follow their administrative rules and structures on how to educate and deal with your own child. And to me, that is horrifying because I don't believe that anybody should have the privilege of a government employee telling them how to live, educate their children, telling them that they don't have a right to do what they want to do with their own children. I don't believe that is a point of view that needs to be brought out to a privilege. It's your right, your bloodline, your child. That's why we'll have this affidavit or the public request notice out here here in a couple of days, and I'll get that out to everybody involved. So that way they could actually put something in, and we could get something in writing. We get it in writing. Now we've got an argument to win your court cases on. And see, it's like I'm posting up right now on the YouTube videos, so you could actually see and click on this stuff, and you can watch what I've testified. You can watch what has been written and what I certified. I even have another one that I did in the judiciary of the state of Oregon at the public hearings. I brought it up, how come the courts are not licensed. I brought it up, how attorneys are fraud, committing criminal activities. And I turned in evidence of the bar license as a fraud. And that is on the website, but on their website, but you really can't read it because they have scribbles all through it. So they don't want people to know that this exists. So when I turn that evidence in, I'm going to try to find that and get that up on the website here. But once that evidence was turned in, they were trying to gavel me out of that room immediately. And all the hearings that I've been in recently, 2 years ago, when they did what they did and I went after them, tried to gavel me out of that room immediately. See, they don't want this stuff on record. They sure don't want it in a court record. That's why when I suggest people to file things in the public hearings, like I do, you know, I bring it up and file this stuff. I'm putting this up on Oregon YouTube channel too. That ran for a month in the newspapers where it says filed, and it's filed in the Oregon State House and Senate public hearings. Nobody disagreed with me. Nobody wanted to get into that with me. It was interesting. Nobody would disagree with me on that at all, which I thought was pretty fun because it proved how right I was again. So it's bringing this up in the public eyes, bringing it up to the House and Senate, and you bring it up for evidence in front of them. You want them to go and have to admit their points of view. You want them to bring it up so that way they argue with themselves. So you don't want to be arguing with these men and women. You want the paper. You want their words to speak for you. That's why I suggest to people, bring your words in. You want your stuff to be heard. So once your stuff is brought into recorded record in the public meetings, and that's what I'm posting up. You can see when I speak, and I bring this stuff in, public records. This is not a joke when you do this. You have to be not afraid of these people to speak. Because remember, these people do not care about you. That is the one thing. They really do not care about you whatsoever. And once you comprehend that these men and women, you know, are only there for profit. And most public employees, they go in and they think they're going to do something wonderful and good, and they're going to do this and that. And then when you get in there, you start realizing that, oh, well, if I don't go this direction or that direction, all of a sudden I'm being attacked. All of a sudden I can't do this or that. Because they'll start personally attacking you. I know. I have been an elected official myself. Been there, done it. When I was elected to the local school committee, 2002, I ended up recalling the entire school committee for fraud. Proved it. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, proved the fraud. And I was able to prove in the recall I did on them, went after them for $30 million that we could prove that was missing out of the budget. We had to trace basically the bank accounts. We just had to get the paperwork from the state to prove that what we did was correct. And so I was being attacked by the state attorney general. I was being attacked by the county public pretender. I mean, they were attacking me left and right. Then they were trying to find out how they could try to bring criminal charges on me. That didn't work. Because they couldn't find criminal charges to go after me on. They didn't like that. Because they wanted to try to charge me criminally for speaking the truth. That was the saddest part, trying to get me criminally charged for speaking the truth, because they didn't want the public to know the money was embezzled, and that was $30 million. That was a guesstimate of $150 million guesstimate. And we were able to prove $30 million on the budget. And we were able to prove that the head of maintenance painted his vehicle out of taxpayer funding. Some of the public employees, took money from different programs and put the money in their pocket. So when you go up there and you're bringing this evidence for it and bringing it up for it, that's what you want to be able to bring into the point of this, to bring it out. You want the facts in that. You want the facts to speak. And once you got the facts to speak the truth, and it's like when I put the evidence in, this is the evidence on one of the meetings, and I did this for several meetings. This is the evidence I put in that I ran in the newspapers for a month. I ran it in the News Times. I ran it in this newspaper, the paper up north of me, Tillamook County. So I ran it in their papers, their structures. They didn't like that and I turned it in for evidence. Nobody wanted to confront it. Nobody wanted to deny it. Because they couldn't deny it because it was publicized, and not only that, a couple of the newspapers actually ran the stuff about what was said about it. And what they did to me in jail. They poisoned me and tried to kill me in jail. And that's all been publicized. People know it. It's not just hearsay evidence. And so it is knowing how to, when you get out there, present the evidence, get the evidence from them, and you want to ask them. And when they're not going to give you the information that you're requesting, when you're not getting the information you are requesting, that's where you need to bring it forward and ask them to produce the evidence or this, that, and the other thing. You want them to prove what they're doing. You want the evidence in your hand. So when they're sitting there not giving you evidence to know what's going on with the truth and structure, well, that's where they end up winning. But if you get the evidence, and then when you go to court, you have evidence. Well, I didn't produce it. They produced it. It's their writing, their handwriting, their structure. And that's what you want to go by, their structure. And when you go by their structure, you're starting to win. Because that is the point. They don't want it out. They're not going to go against you on it. And when you win your court cases, it's just something, pass on the education to somebody else, but you don't sit out there and rub it in their face. Because once you start rubbing it in their face, they're going to basically looking how to come after you. Believe me, I've done that, learned that, know that. So these are things of how to not have these things happen to you in some regards. And knowing when you go up and speak in front of these public servants, knowing what you're talking about. That is the main thing. Knowing what you are personally talking about when you talk at public meetings. Have your facts in your hand. Have your evidence in your hand. Because once you have it in your hand, they can't deny that. See, that's the one thing. You want to produce the evidence that brings them basically to their knees. You want their evidence. You want that to speak for you. And once you have their evidence speaking for you, you can start winning. That's the whole purpose here. Is to know how to win in these courts so you're not fighting and going back and forth and arguing and wasting your life on this stuff. Because once you start winning and you start proving this stuff, then all of a sudden they don't want nothing to do with you. You'll start figuring that out. They don't want nothing to do with you. So when they don't want nothing to do with you, hey, you won. You know, I mean, I've got public servants that when I travel, some like I get some of them that wave at me when I was traveling before I ran through this last issue I went through that I'm working to get that straightened out. But I'm in, and I had cops that would pull me over and ask me, it would shock the daylights out of me because they were going through a case that they were dealing with something or family or somebody else. And they would ask me what would my suggestion be. You know, you don't sit there and brag about that. You take it in spirit and pleasure that, okay, somebody got it. Somebody listened. And it's not all cops are bad. I'll tell you that right off the front. We do have good elected and public officials. We really do have a few out there that are really good elected and public officials. We have a lot of them out there that are basically criminals, as you know. They kidnap you for the rights to travel, for personal and financial gain. That's what it comes down to. It's all about personal and financial gain. And when a cop gets pulled over out there, he knows what's going on when he pulls you over. He knows what he's doing. That is the point that you need to realize that these men and women do know what they're doing when they pull you over. They're going to lie to you, number one. Number two, that's their employment to lie. And that's where people don't get it. The Supreme Court says a cop could lie what they call to get the evidence on you. And so they're allowed to lie. And so that is the saddest part about when they sit there and do this stuff to we the people. Literally do this. And then they lie about it. And then we're the ones that pay for this stuff. We're the ones that pay for the court systems, but that's what they claim. But courts are free. They're prepaid. I do have evidence on that, and we put the evidence too up on our YouTube channel too, and also too I put it all over our Facebook structure too. So that way you have it, so that way you know what the truth is, and we got it setting up there so when people could go to the new.org and trackers, we have the structure up there too, where it states very, very, very clearly that courts are not for we the people, so you don't have to pay for the courts when you go into them. That is the one thing that you have to comprehend. You don't have to pay for these courts. We have the evidence to prove it. But it's knowing how to put the paperwork together to see if you are lawful, legal, or if you know what you're doing. And that is the one thing that, you have to know these things. Nobody else cares about what's going on. That's the one thing. Most people don't even care about what you're personally going through. Most people know that one right off the bat. And that is another frustrating point because, we all go through things. We all know we're getting hurt and offended. We know these things have been taken out of context against us. We know that when you go in there that they're already lying to begin with on what's going on. And that is the most valuable lesson in life, to comprehend that these men and women are lying. So when they are lying, nail them on it. Have the evidence. So we're going to be, like I said, I'm putting together some public records requests dealing with, one, who owns the children? I think that's a good point to start. Who owns the children? Do they? Do we? Who owns the children? So we want to get that in writing. And so with the people that do get certified letters back or letters back confirming this, we like them to make sure that we get a copy of it so we can bring it forward. We want people to know what's going on with these men and women, how they're taking advantage of us and our children. Once we've got the evidence out there for others to start reading and others start picking up how to handle things correctly, then we can move and get a lot more things done. And once that happens, it's going to be a lot simpler for the children not to be kidnapped. It's going to be a lot simpler for people not to basically take advantage of the children or even the elderly disabled. I mean, there's people that are elderly and disabled who've been taken advantage of by the system or family members. And then putting that together, it's like, reading the instruments that is filed. Did the instruments that they put in, is it lawful or legal? Did they have the clerk? Was the clerk doing it? Is it a family member? Find out if it's a family member, because that's illegal. And knowing how these things work. Once you put the pieces together on how these things really work, then that way when you go into these court systems, or when you go speak at a public meeting, now you know that their reaction of what they're going to do. You get to know how to handle yourself. Because that is the most important thing, is knowing how to handle yourself when you're going to these courtrooms. Knowing how to deal with your public servants. When you speak to them at a public meeting, make sure you have the evidence in your hand of what you're talking about. Produce the evidence so that way it's put into public record. Once it's put into public record, oh my God, they can't start going against that. Because then they have to go against themselves, and they're not going to self-incriminate themselves. A lot of them will give you honorable responses back. I've got one on what I'm putting together on something else right now. So I want to see when these things start coming out and people start getting these things that are being produced. I want to see you start winning on these things. I want to see you producing this and bringing it out for others to look at the stuff, so that way they can know how to present something. Because the point is, not everybody knows how to present something correctly. I mean, trust me, I've had a lot of hard knocks on my head, and, been there, done it. I've made embarrassing statements in public record myself because, a couple times I wasn't right on the issue. Of course, I had a couple wanted to make a mockery out of me on that, so that way they can do it. Which happened. Okay, I had to live with that, but the next time I went in, I got more prepared, more ready for the questions that they were going to try to come back after me to ask, that I knew that I had the response to respond back to them. Once you have the response to go back at them to bring that up, then you start winning. And that's the whole point about this. We're doing this education not only just for you, not only just for us, but we're doing it for everybody so we get to know who's winning and who's losing. We want to make sure that you have the winning case or the knowledge when you go into a public speaking. We want to make sure that you have the knowledge to go in and speak the truth. Because if you don't have the knowledge to speak the truth, how are you supposed to know the truth? And that is the biggest structure that we have today. A lot of people go into this stuff, don't know what they're talking about. They don't have evidence in their hands. So they go in what they call hearsay evidence. And that's why I tell people all the time, when you go to court, don't have hearsay evidence. Have facts in your hand. Once you have facts in your hand, now they can't argue. And when you go public speaking, it's like, I remember when I used to go public speaking at the city council meetings, there was a lot of us there for a long time, but then people started getting attacked. And then people started going along with the attacking that they were getting. And started just complying with different things. And that was even worse. Which disturbed me. I still don't comprehend why some people would sit there and go along with that. And then you try to get people to stand together with one another. Well, we all know how that one goes. Because people sit there and they don't want to stand with one another a lot of times. And that's the saddest part we're living. What an example we show to the kids that we're not participating, protecting one another. We're not participating to protect the children in our own community. And I don't like using the word community because that's a British structure, to tell you the truth. But I want to be able to make sure that we know where the kids are at, if need be. And that's the one thing everybody goes, well, we don't know where the kids are at. Well, I'll tell you one thing. When I grew up, everybody in town knew where the kids were at. Everybody knew what was going on. So when parents don't sit there and they say, well, we don't know what's going on. Sorry, I don't buy it, because when I grew up, we all knew who, what, why, and who was doing what in the community or the town. Everybody knows what's going on in the town. They really do. So once you comprehend that these men and women know what's going on in the community, it's not being out there being like a rat to rat on people. That's what we're supposed to be enjoying life. Educating one another, so that way we know that, like, kids can go out and hunt and fish. They know how to gut a fish. They know how to skin a deer, skin an elk. And when you go into these public hearings, that's the way you got to look at these people. It's like a friend of mine used to always tell me, when you go into these meetings, of course I never got that. I couldn't do that. Always look at them and just look at them and think about them being in their underwear. I was like, what the hell would anybody go that route? Well, some people have to come up with a way where they have to overcome their speaking ability, because they have to put something else, because so not everybody could just go up and publicly speak without a conflict of interest in their own mind when they're speaking. And once people can do that and not be afraid, basically, of their own shadow, that's how we're going to win these things. Asking with affidavits to them, public record requests. Who owns the children? What about this? What about that? We start getting that out there, and things are going to start changing. That's a guarantee. Things are going to change. But we have to make the change happen. It ain't going to happen without us. I'll tell you that. Everybody knows that one. Or without you being involved, it ain't going to happen. So you need to participate on what's going on in your community. You need to participate on what somebody else is publicly speaking. Go to somebody's court hearing, sit down, watch what a judge does. Go sit in front of a jury and watch what the jury, if the judge actually instructs the jury on the jury rights. Because I brought this up before, but in Lincoln County, I remember when they were throwing the jury handbooks out in the garbage, coming up with a new democratic way of the hand for juries and for the judges, that the judges own the courtroom. And that was based partly over the J. Smith murder trial that would happen, or accidental shooting, happened up in Portland, Oregon. 1988, when they changed the court structure, because they changed it from jury trials to a judge handling a case. And I was personally livid over that one, because that was my brother-in-law. When you live through some of these atrocities, I get really disturbed when these people go out and they do this with, the fake shootings to go after people's rights of arms. And the Democrats have already been nailed for paying people like this to do it. And remember, when you go to these public hearings and these lobbyists, remember, these guys are paid big dollars to be a lobbyist. And I'm talking big dollars they're paid. This is not just a small amount of money where they get for these things. An average lobbyist makes a basic minimum, roughly $100,000, and it goes up there from there, and they could even get double digits. And they really can get double digit, and that's the one thing that people need to comprehend, that they do make that kind of money. They truly do make that kind of money. So when they're making this kind of money at your expense and then they're billing you for it, because they do bill you for it. That's what a bill is. When they pass a House and Senate bill, they're billing you for their structure. Exactly what they're doing. They're billing you to pay for them to have a job. And that's exactly what they're doing, is they want you to pay the privilege for them. So once you start realizing that you don't have to be able to pay the privilege, and a bill is like a bill that you get at a grocery store or going out to breakfast or something like that. It's the same thing as a bill. A bill is a bill. So it's just paying attention to the circumstances of how these things work and how they work professionally. And once you got that, then you can start winning a lot of these cases. Things come into place. They really do start coming into place. And so I think with that, we're going to open up the floor, see if anybody wants to bring something in. Hopefully that one lady I did invite, it would be nice if she did show up. But I'd like to see.
All participants are unmuted.
The floor is open.
Ed.
Yeah.
You said Article 1 is a non-constitutional court?
Yeah, those are administrative courts.
And then Article 3 is a what then?
Constitution Court. Article 3 is the one that's in the Constitution.
Okay. And so then, and that's the one where you can get 12 jurors?
Right. And you have to request that.
In what? In your pleading or in a motion or what?
You never want to do a pleading, because when you do a pleading, you're asking permission. You do an affidavit, and you want to bring that into play, so that way, and you're putting in their administrative rules of what they have to go by, what they're supposed to do. You don't want to put a pleading in, because then you're asking permission, and you're not there to ask permission. Is that, you see where I'm going with that? Why would you plead? Or it's like people will sit there, well, I'm the defendant. No, I don't put defendant on what I'm involved in. I always put the injured party victim, because you are the victim. You are not just a pleader or a whiner, and that's what they go after. And I think I'll put that stuff on your wall here in just a second, so that way you actually got the definition of both of them by their own mission.
So then, basically, what you want to, well, let's say you're the plaintiff. You don't put plaintiff, but corpus delicti?
Right. Title 18, 3771. You always want to put corpus delicti. I had a judge explain that to me one day. That says if you don't put corpus delicti in that, that's how they throw out your case. And he goes, I love it when people don't do their paperwork right. And I was talking to the judge when I was up at the Capitol, basically assisting a senator, and I was talking to him about different things about how courts work and stuff like that. But I was aiding a senator, so I mean, he, was very bluntly with me. So that's what I thought was wonderful, because he didn't hide back anything. He was straight up blunt with me. Well, of course, I have a problem. I couldn't sell my soul to the company store. I just don't believe in that. So, and that was a blessing that I was able to learn and learn on those circumstances. So when it's like, the one thing is that one guy mentioned to me about that in one of the cases he's dealing with, that one of the notaries were, a family member of another. Well, look up your notary law in the state. It'll tell you that's illegal. That's where people got to look at their administrative rules. Look at what they have to go by. It's like banking laws. And I put this up with banking laws. And it's like I suggest to people, read the banking laws that the banks have to go by. Read their structure that they're supposed to go by. Not what they tell you or put in your paperwork, because your paperwork is different than the administrative laws that they have to go by. And these men and women do it deliberately on those points. And they know it. They truly know it. But that's how they make their income, basically, is lying. Honesty, most people who are really honest, they don't make a large income because of being honest. And if you notice that these judges and attorneys make a lot of money for being dishonest. And we know that. We know that. So, but yeah, I'll get that up on your wall here in just a minute, so that way you have it, and then that way you can do a reference on that structure and to confirm what I'm saying, so that way you've got it.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no problem. Because like I said, the whole thing, what I learned, I pass it on because I want everybody else to learn and be able to defend themselves. Because if we don't be able to have the evidence to defend ourselves, because we have to do it ourselves. Because it's like the other thing I had a judge tell me. Everybody goes, well, they want them to do all this in court, and the judge told me, we can't do anything. A lawyer cannot do nothing for you. If you don't write your cases and do it correctly yourself, we can't do anything about that one, but we can do it if you have a lawyer do it. We can sit there and go after them. That's the one point that we know that they do this deliberately. And that's what it is, trying to get people to comprehend the circumstances of these things. So once you comprehend the Article 1 court is a corporation, and that goes when they have the gold fringe flag in it. And everybody knows that one with the gold fringe flag, that's a maritime courtroom or a military courtroom. It's a tribunal. Technically, it's a tribunal courtroom. So when you go into these tribunals, they know what they're doing. And they're out there to do this because they want the income from you.
But isn't that deceiving the community? I mean, that's
yeah.
How can you ever expect to get justice if that's all they're doing is deceiving everybody?
Well, that's the point. You have to know how to write your case up, and to get justice, you have to take it in the right court. If you don't take it in the right court, that's how they're getting around the administrative rules on this stuff. And they know it. It's like I had a gentleman that, just sent me the other court case where I've been preaching about, and I put up all over the internet about the justice rules. Police do not have a constitutional duty to protect you. The courts have even put it in writing that the cops are basically tax collectors for the city, county, and state. They're not there for you. And once people comprehend that they're not there for you, then you start realizing, oh, well, now I have to do this myself, because if I don't do this myself, nothing's going to get correctly done. And that's the whole point. You need to read this stuff and know how it works for you. And once you get that and you know they're deceiving you, hey, you've already ahead of the game. So once you get that and you have the evidence to do that, I even have the paperwork. The federal law says if a clerk don't file your paperwork, the clerk can go to jail. So that's the one thing that people need to have this stuff when you're putting in your case, because sometimes I know I do overkill in my cases. Some of my stuff, my writing, I basically write a book out of it. And because I want to make sure the kitchen sink is thrown in, so that way there's never a conflict of interest. But then I got people saying, hey, Ed, you can shorten it down. You can actually do a page or two and get it done. Okay, well, I haven't, the best I've ever done on having it done like that was 3 pages. But, I'm always willing to learn, too, another way. So when I learn it, I'll pass it on, because that's the whole point about doing these educational shows, is so that way we have it for ourselves. So anyhow, it won't let me post this on your wall, I guess. So I'll have to find your email and email it to you. I've been having a little fun with Facebook lately, because everything I've been posting has been coming back. Everything has been being marked out as spam because somebody reported me on Facebook again. Of course, that frustrates me, because that's when people do this stuff because they don't like what you're doing, because you're exposing even some of these dirty people out there, which I have done, don't have a problem doing, but they don't like it when you sit there and do that, and there's another gentleman that I brought up, and I put his talk show on my sites, and he's exposing some of these con artists out there. That are doing these court cases and taking people's money. So once you realize that a lot of these people are out there taking people's money, you get a different opinion on what's going on out there. And that's the one thing, too, that people have got to really get comprehended on this fact of how these cases work, how the courts manipulate the people into it. Because, like I said, the main thing is knowing what court you are going into. And knowing when you're putting your court cases together to do it. And I do recommend, too, people go online and read the way attorneys have written court cases, too. Read what judges' opinions are, because then once you start reading that stuff, you know, and you start getting a concept of how they put their court case together, and then when you put yours in and you've got the evidence with your court case, because you have to do, when you do an affidavit, you have to put evidence to support everything that you're claiming.
And
people, go ahead.
Yeah, I did research something, and I did find something. It says that that the executive branch is tied with the judicial in the family law, and that they have a contract with the attorney general, the attorneys, the local sheriff, to do all this stuff, and that they get 66% federal funding and another 33% or 34% from the other stuff that they get payment on, along with the filing fees, which is $25 for whoever files for child support, plus to maintain it another $25 fee that they take out monthly, even in the federal rules shows that it does not have the best interest of the child. Along with that, that they that the judges are not literally judges; they are surrogates or magistrates of the court.
Mm-hmm.
So all their rulings that they're making, if they're a surrogate, then how can they turn around and sign a bench warrant or even operate the way they're doing if they're not judges? And also found, like what you were saying, because you're on point with it, that the duties of the attorneys are first to the court. So then basically when you walk in, you're like a little sheep. You have no idea what the hell's going on, basically being thrown into a lion's den. The judge who's already against you is one lion. The attorney that you hired, which to me is malpractice and a conflict of interest, is already against you, so he's another lion, and he's not even there to really help you at all.
Mm-hmm.
They're just there to just rape, rob, and pillage you, like what you've always said.
No, and that's the point. When you do your paperwork, you bring this evidence to them, and you expose them of what they're doing. See, once you start exposing them with their own rules, they don't like it. They just can't handle it. So once you start putting this with their own rules in, then all of a sudden you've got the evidence to back it up. You know, and that is a valid point that you brought up, that you bring it up, because most people don't research it like you are doing. They don't want to take the time, but they want somebody else to hold their hand and do everything for them. And then they wonder why it doesn't work when they do the stuff, why it doesn't work. And to me, it's like simple. It's like you can't see how it works. That's the thing that gets to me. It is that simple. You know, I mean, it is learning how it works. And when you're bringing up these points, that's where they don't want you to see how these things come together. It's like the guy sent me the court case on dealing with when Judge Scalia decision came out, and I got that, and I'll get that posted up too. And where it was very simple. Very simple. It says the cops have no obligation to protect you. And there's another court decision I got too that states clearly clearly that the police officers are IRS collection agents for the city, county, and state. And that's the whole point. When people could see this and when they comprehend it, life becomes so simpler once you start realizing how it really is simple compared to what we make an issue of it. And that's the one thing is people make issues of stuff. A lot of people don't even know what the issues are when they're going to court anyways. What the actual court case is all about when they get there. They don't know how to do it. And then they want to sit there and argue. Well,
Interjection.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Ed.
Yeah, go ahead. Floor is yours.
Good job. You're a brilliant man for having the courage to be able to disseminate some of your experience with some of your knowledge on the open airway for all the rest of us sheeple people, including myself, me and I. I have a question.
Yeah.
In regards to, say, some party, man or woman, going into the tribunal and requesting the register or case summary of the year-long probate proceedings, and then and of course the worker bee in the building of the court system, has already whatever. There's already been some personal feelings, but anyway, the party coming in, they're asking for the record, and they're told, fine, that'll be, or they want to certify it, so they're being told, the cost for the fee for the certification, but then because they're being military about this, they want this party not knowing it may have another option or not. They want 25 cents a copy. So now this record, they're told, require a cost or tax of $600 and something to get that record. So is that what you were talking about earlier? We as the sheeple people aren't required by some system of their rule from that tax?
Well, yeah, and also too on that one too is that you could even file when they're asking for the money to file on them to prove what money they want. They have a legal obligation to give you the copy
They didn't tell her they didn't want the money. They just said, fine, we'll be happy to provide that record for you, but that'll be $600 and something.
Right. I know. I heard. I clarified. I clearly heard you.
And so
but then
I want to know: is there some one of their rules somewhere in a book that I can read, look at, and read, and say, oh, see here, you're not supposed to be charging weed the sheep.
Yeah, I can do that. I think I might have sent that to you, and if I haven't, I'll even send you that where the courts are free.
Well, you don't have to send it to me, but if it's on your site, I can get to your site and learn that. I suppose I thought maybe you just might reference it quickly, or if your screen's in front of you, you could reference it for us all.
I don't have my screen up in front of me. I believe it is on it, but I'll make sure it's posted here shortly on my website, my Facebook sites, and I'll post it up on yours as well.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't require any special.
Oh yeah, no, because it goes not only for you, but everybody who's on your site looks at it, so it helps them too.
Okay.
So I mean, that's the whole point, that we're all educating each other to learn the truth about all this stuff, and that is the point when we start working with each other instead of arguing about semantics, and we start working with one another, and we can prove this stuff, and we're proving this. Oh, and then that way we're not arguing with one another. We're looking how to take one experience from somebody else's experience, put it together. So if we got one that ain't working, then this way we get everybody starting to work. So that's the whole beauty. That's what I want to do is like eventually what the whole thing was to set up a deal so that way, we could have court watchers basically. I know some people have done that, try to set them up. But a lot of these people, when they set them up, they didn't have it set up for people in the area to be buzzed. They didn't have it set up in the area for, people to have phone chains going when something happened. And then a couple of them who did that, then they started charging everybody for their time for doing it. And then they're telling everybody else they're not going to do that, and then they're doing the opposite of what they're telling people what they're not going to do. You know what I mean by that. You've seen that yourself. So it is a very frustration circumstances when those things like that happen. I'm going to your I'll have this posted up for you here in a minute. But that is the one point too, is that, you know, working together on these issues, educating one another, because it's not about one knowing something. And it's like when I was a chef and an auto mechanic. All right, one mechanic would know something I didn't know. I would know something the mechanic wouldn't know. And, you didn't work with each other to educate one another. You had to keep your secrets so that way you kept employed. And it's like cooking. I know a lot of cooks. I mean, I showed a lot of cooks different recipes. I mean, my own boss, one of my chefs I worked for, Andrew, I showed him because I did a strawberry salmon that everybody thought I was crazy when I made the strawberry salmon. And in the Oregon cook-off for the state of Oregon, he won first place with the strawberry salmon. And then what was interesting, because I was scheduled to go to the cook-off for this, to go to the state champion deal for the chef's deal. I was scheduled to go that. Next thing you know, I'm scheduled to go to work, which I thought was interesting. And then he goes to the thing and wins it. So, you know, things like that happen, even in auto mechanics. You know, everybody goes, well, you have the trade secret. Well, it's like attorneys do the same thing. They know their trade secrets of what they're doing, and they don't want to have somebody else know that how they manipulated or how they're able to financially incorporate their structure into the judge. Because let me tell you, court cases are bought and paid for too. Well, that's the one thing that people do know. So anyhow, you got that on your wall, and when I get to this other one too, I'll get that sent to you too. So, but that is on your wall right now. And that is the point of knowing how to file these things, so that way, you know, you're not paying all this out-of-pocket stuff. And then by federal law that I post up too, federal law says that you're not allowed to use a debt note to pay debt. So when you're paying the courts, and if you ever pay the courts, that's why I tell people, you know, if you're in the tax system, file a 1099 on them. Because if they don't report that income, that's an actual federal crime. And there's been 4 courthouses across the United States that have been literally closed down by the IRS for not filing their 1099 tax receipts when somebody filed on them. So the IRS knows that everybody's getting away with scamming on this with the court system.
And
But
I interject?
Go ahead.
What's it look like when somebody wants to challenge? I mean, like if I wanted to challenge a certain venue within one of the 33 counties of Oregon, how would I contact the Internal Revenue Service with the possible fact that this circuit in Grant County just got my corporation for millions through the charging of the all capital letter name, and maybe as you just said, they didn't pay the taxes. So how do I contact the IRS? I mean,
that's simple. They have a form on the IRS page itself. And there's a form on it to file tax fraud on them. And also, too, when they do that, you want to be able to file identity theft, too, which I do have filed and going on right now today. Because when the county stole my identity and took my fingerprints and my photograph for the FBI crap and all that, right now I've got it filed with identity theft, and I'm working to get that scheduled for a basic federal court hearing on that one. They don't want that to go through because, like the lady that told me at the Trade Commission, she goes, basically, what you filed, we don't want that on public record. So I'm trying to get them to do something faster and more expedient on that. So it is trying to get these things done so we can get these things processed. And identity theft is one thing that people can file. And if people know that they can file identity theft when you get kidnapped and held for ransom. The police department stole your identity.
Well,
Using your tax records. Go ahead.
May I interject?
Yeah.
My idea is that now that I'm able to learn about the estate, that was created with that so-called certificate of birth
Mm-hmm.
for the infant, and it's known as a sedicate trust.
Right.
And those words in and of themselves, unfortunately, I waited just till in a few days of going to Black's Law to define each one of those. And the sedicate, everything speaks for itself. But do you have anything on your web or wall or what have you for beginning one to learn about the structure of the estate that was created with them arriving, coming out of Mama's womb, what have you?
Yes, I do. Yes, I believe we do. We have a page on that. Yes. And we got more information we're going to be getting up there that is derived actually from the courts itself. That we've even got the court submitting to it.
Well, may I interject?
Yeah.
You know, as a young boy, I remember, I think the first time through commercials, Chevrolet apple pie and grandma or something like that. But it would have been better had there been. Well, it'd been better, I guess, if my parents had been more aware. But what I'm getting at here is that for me, I first still, as I have had to learn now as an older child, over the age of 25.
Okay.
I've had to learn that I'm a slave on a plantation.
Mm-hmm.
God damn it. And I can bark, fart, squeak, and rattle all I want. But I also was only taught the language of a slave.
Correct.
And when I began to, I don't know, grasp for more air, more logic, for greater depth of reasoning, I met strife. But for me, that strife began underneath the roof with the two people giving me their implants. Some of them positive and some of them negative. And the negative ones that were with deceit and malice were very, very harmful. And so many of us as children, that's where it begins. Everything starts somewhere, whether it's in a soup can under a bridge, under a nice house, or where back of a coach traveling across the land, in a boat on the water. It begins somewhere and somehow. And, learning that I was a slave on the plantation, and there was plantation rules and plantation bosses and an administration to oversee all that. And what the administration was to handle was the trust that was created, because everything's in bankruptcy now, functioning and operating under what is known as public policy. So I needed to have some foundation, and I still need that foundation.
Well, I did send you the certified copy that's in Congressional Record of 192 that's certified by Congress stating that they're supposed to pay the bills.
And since you said that, I went to the Black's Law bill. That takes up a lot of pages. It covers a lot of territory. And just if I'd have studied that one word alone, I could figure out there's some kind of plantation. There's some kind of something going on. That one word alone, Black's Law Dictionary bill.
Right, but you're missing one point on this. It's like we're going to be putting this affidavit together, this public record request, and start sending it out, and you'll get a copy of it too, so that way we can start nailing the House and Senate on these issues. We want them to put it in writing on it. And then that way we have an evidence package that we're going to be put together. Once you got their certification that says who the child is owned by, Then we could go after them with the evidence package, so people can sit there and get out of the plantation. But first,
well, according to the Libre Code, we're supposed to be able to live and function within and throughout, express, implied, or otherwise,
right.
with their system, and not have our ens legis, sedicate trust, manipulated.
Correct. But see, the thing is,
while we live.
Unless you file on it and correct it, that's how they're getting away with this.
Well, of course,
you have
away with it because it wasn't never taught to the masses. It still isn't taught to the masses.
No, it's not taught to the masses. They quit teaching that in school in 1980.
No, they're not teaching the commercial process. They're not teaching.
I know all that.
I want to add, and I'm going to let you go.
Once people get off they go to the public meeting, they start outlining this to the senators and congressmen and saying, you have a contract with us for education, and you have a contract with education that you have to perform these duties. Okay? Once you put that on the floor, it's like this one lady. Right now, she just put on the floor, she's got a hearing going on with Florida on her rights of being a mother. And Florida House and Senate picked it up. So they're having a meeting on it.
May I interject?
But she needs to have as many witnesses go into that hearing to speak on that hearing on the behalf, so that way we know that here's the law. Here's what they have to do. How come you're not doing that? And then put in the record that you're filing the treason charges on them right there on spot until they get it corrected.
Well, if you can get that lady promoted through every varsity halftime basketball game and every college halftime varsity game.
But it's going to take people like you in your area to do this as well. And I'll post her thing on your wall here in a minute, too. You can see what's going on. But with the public hearings, it takes people to be at the public hearings. I've been at hundreds of public hearings. And all I get when I go to these public hearings is me testifying. I mean, we had to set up several times where we had 100 people that was going to be there. Then all of a sudden, people didn't show up. And I was the only one testifying. And that pissed the hell out of me. You know, all these people said that they were going to be there, and then nobody else showed up. And then everybody's like, well, how did it go, Ed? And it's like, where were you? You were already scheduled to be there with me. Why didn't you show up? Well, all of a sudden something showed up or came up, and then all of a sudden we didn't want to be involved because we didn't want to have our name with DHS so they could track us and harass us.
May I interject?
And it's like, so in other words, you're teaching fair to your kids. So you're teaching them to be on the plantation. You're inspecting.
Well, may I interject?
Go ahead again.
Where is the platform for so-called freedom? Where is the platform for this middle ground? Never was one, okay? And if there was one, it hasn't been an order of time. So,
but you have to file for it. That's what we're putting these public requests and having the senators sign this stuff. I've already got it signed, and some of them set up on property taxes and stuff. I've got the public hearing when I even got the House members to admit property taxes are voluntary, so I'm getting ready to put all that together.
Well, we certainly have every privilege of right of privilege to follow these quests which you expose for us because they have nothing.
Thank you. You're talking too much negative. You're not hearing how to successfully do this stuff. People are off the tax rolls. People have won these cases. But it's individually. And they do this for a reason called immigration, because immigrants don't have a damn right in this country, period. And some people say, well, the 14th Amendment gives these immigrants more rights than we the people, which is bullshit, because the Supreme Court separated in Supreme Court decisions and read in the House and records that I have that states a lawful American versus a legal citizen or person or national. They already have this stuff written up in congressional records, but you have to stand on it. You have to file it. You have to do it individually, because they're not doing this on a class deal, so that way these immigrants get these rights that they don't have a right to in our country. They don't have a right to food. They don't have a right to free courts. They don't have a right to our public transportation and structure at free expense to the general public on what they call property taxes, or what they call on tax and fees that they do in the court systems, because when they collect on court fines, a lot of the court fines go to the programs that they fund themselves on. So it's putting this stuff together and acting on it and make sure it happens. People have to do the paperwork. They have to do, this structure, to do this. It comes to them doing this stuff. And if people don't do it and stand up for their rights, that's where the people lose. The men and women lose. Their children lose because, as you say, on being on the plantation, okay, we all know that we've been instructed to be on this so-called plantation. How do you get off the plantation? That's the point of putting this stuff together, to get off the plantation. Once people get off the plantation individually, like they're supposed to do themselves, because it's like going in with a class action lawsuit. The judge could throw out a class action lawsuit by his determination. End of story. He has authority to say, well, that wasn't put in the class action lawsuit, so I'm throwing it out. And he gets away doing that because people don't file their court cases individually, so if one wins, they all win. But in a class action lawsuit, it depends on the way you file the things. Most people don't claim in a lawsuit that they are the injured man or woman. They claim that I am the defendant. They don't say how they were personally harmed. They don't say the circumstances of the injury, what they sustained, the personal, emotional damage, the financial damage. And these are things that you have to put in these cases so that way you have the right to be heard. And if people don't start doing this, this is how they throw out the cases. I mean, I just went through that when I read the Bundy's court case. It was written like a story for a movie title. It had nothing to do with the injured party. They didn't have a corpus delicti in it. Nobody claimed how they were actually injured. It basically comes down to is saying that, oh, well, we were hurt and we were harmed, but they didn't say anything how. They didn't put in the financial damages, including how much they paid for lawyers and attorneys. They didn't put in the damages of what they sustained on their own property and stuff by the corporation that attacked them. And that's the point, that people have got to start putting this stuff in so that way they have it, so that way they know the structure. Because if they don't know the structure, this is what the point that frustrates me when people want to argue instead of learning how the process works, learning how to do it so that way it's them individually. It is not where it's to save the world. The United States of the 48 states is not for the world. And for an immigrant to come to this country, it's a privilege, not a right. And once people start comprehending that it's a privilege, not a right, then we can start doing this. I mean, Donald Trump is the only president that shut off the border that everybody's panicking over. He's shipping out illegals that they got him on Facebook pleading, please don't ship me out for my mommy and my daddy, or ship my son out because he wasn't registered and he didn't do this and he should be given special treatment because, he was born here. Or, we brought him over and he's been here for 22 years and all of a sudden he got caught by ISIS and we're supposed to have compassion? Sorry. I went to their country. Doesn't matter. England, France, Mexico, Canada is iffy sometimes. But the rest of them, they put you out. Mexico, minimum, if you get caught there without your papers and proper structure, it's minimum 1 year, maximum 2 years as an immigrant invader in Mexico. That's their law, and they abide by it. When they catch you, there's no jury trial and structure in Mexico. They prove it, you go to jail. End of story. France does the same thing. That's where people have got to start realizing when you fight this stuff, you do it. And then when I get this stuff getting out, putting the stuff out that we're putting out right now on how to go after your public servants. So you have to do this stuff. You know, I've sent people a lot of information, and it's like it's frustrating when they don't read it, and then they want to go off in different directions without reading something that would, if they read it and comprehend it, they would comprehend what the meaning is and how to do it. Life really is not that difficult. Most people make life more difficult for themselves over the structure than people even give credit to. That's the one sad part about all this structure that goes on. People make life difficult for themselves. So once you start filing and you go to the senators and congressmen and you ask them to get a certified copy, you want this in writing. You want to go to the courts. You ask the court for their mission statement. It's like you ask the county commissioners for their mission statement. You want it certified. You go to the county clerk. You ask them for a copy of their mission statement and have them certify it. When I deregulated myself as a voter, I had it certified that I can never be in the elections or process or anything like that. And the clerk goes, well, you know, if you go through this step with your filling out this paperwork that we have here, and you fill this out, you know you can't register and you can't do this again and stuff. And I said, yes, I know. I want to be out of your system. I want off the plantation. And that's the point of knowing how to do it. Believe me, I fought and argued and cussed up and down, went through all the circumstances that most people go through this stuff. And then when I started putting the pieces together and I started putting, you know, each individual case together that on me and going into each department and getting myself out of their system. Once you start getting that certified or you send them the registered letter, and then that way, you know, once you start doing that, you know, that's the only way it's going to happen. That is the only way it's going to happen. But arguing about semantics doesn't do a damn bit of good for anybody. It's figuring out, and that's a solution, what we are working on, what we have been providing, what we're bringing out to the general public, so that way they have the solution to the problem. This way they know how to file. They know how to put themselves out of the voter registration system. And that's what you want to do. Put yourself out of their system. And you have the authority to do that. Simple. You have the authority. And once people start comprehending that they have the authority and how to do it, you can't argue with it. And I don't give a damn about immigration. I want to talk about lawful Americans. And I get tired of these illegals and these people going, well, we have rights in your country and you have to do what we say. No, we don't. They don't have rights. And once people start standing up to the foreign terrorists and start standing up to these men and women that are sitting there trying to put all these rights from their country into our country, like Sharia law, once we start standing up to this, we can stop this crap. But we, the people, have to do it. There ain't no God gonna do it. Hate to tell you, folks, but God ain't gonna do it. Praying ain't gonna do nothing unless you sit there and do it yourself and get off your butt and start doing it. It's so simple. We, the people, have to do it. Once we, the people, start successfully doing this stuff, then we have something we can sit there and argue about, or, well, after that point, there's no argument. See, I don't get where people want to argue about stuff when once you do it correctly, there's no argument. When I got myself deregulated as a voter, that way, because if you're a voter, a registered voter, you're taking liability, personal responsibility for the bills that they pass at the Oregon House and Senate, or Florida House and Senate, or Utah House and Senate. And once you're a registered voter, you're saying, okay, I want to pay your bills. Okay, you could take my assets to pay the debt off that you create, that you're supposedly working for me not to create. So there are solutions to these problems. And it depends on when people want to make sure that the solutions to the problems become solvable. And once people start making those solvable issues a reality, then this stuff starts being coming to the point where all of a sudden we're not arguing over bullshit. Once people start succeeding and you start watching people who succeed and stuff instead of keep going through their crap that they go back and forth on. Watch the people. Learn from the people who are succeeding. Read their stuff. I have a lot of stuff up on new.org and trackers that walks people through. We got templates up there and stuff to use for your own personal knowledge. You're an adult. You're liable for your own actions. Don't include me into your actions. I just write this stuff up. I put it out there. I write it when I put in court cases or when I write to the Senate and congressmen and ask them different questions. I put this stuff up for people to do the same thing. You know, you want to ask them, what is the lawful difference of money? What is the lawful rights of travel? And you want to get it certified and notarized to you. Sometimes they won't certify it, notarize it to you. But on the other hand, when you got the email that says this is the way it is, well, you got some evidence, even though, you know, I mean, that is still evidence because they can go through their own computers at the office and prove it. So it's knowing how to put your arguments in writing. That's why the schools took out cursive, because cursive is a cursive. Cursive means you're cursing at somebody. So it is so simple when you sit there and start putting these things together and start getting this stuff. But going through the semantics of everybody wants to argue a point instead of learning how to do it, that's where we're screwing each other. See, that's the point. We're not supposed to be screwing each other. We're supposed to be learning so the next man and woman don't have to go through this difficulty. And sometimes men and women, and we got men and women out there who are special, or I'm going to say it the way it really does. I can't do this democratic stuff. It's called mentally retarded, okay? If they're mentally retarded, yes, they need somebody to guide them, help them, do the paperwork, do that with them, walk them through it, and take responsibility. But you don't want them to sign over their assets and trust to you. You don't want them to sign over power of attorney. You want to make sure that your public servants know that you help this man or woman because they are in this challenged position. It's not because of they did anything wrong or indifferent. It's the way that life happened for them. The Senate and House ain't going to do it because they want to put these men and women in these mental institutions where they make money. They want to put them in special housing, foster care, all this stuff so they can make money off of them. They don't care about their freedom. And a lot of mentally retarded people, and I'll say it the way it is, I can't do this politically correct shit, but mentally retarded people, I know quite a few really mentally retarded people that live at their own home. They don't have somebody else taking care of their daily needs, and they're able to take care of their own personal responsibility. And it's Asian people.
We don't need you as
Go
a
ahead.
fucking license.
Huh? So anyhow, we're not doing cussing on this show. I try to stay away from that. We have to have respect for one another. But I mean, this is the point that comes down to is doing it correctly, learning how to do it correctly. You know, I mean, I did that with one native, you know, 9E. I helped him out with a lot of his stuff. He finally got out of jail. Did he go after to file the charges on these people? He did it in court. Never went back to have the court overturned. Never challenged the court after he got out. And then he wants to sit there and do what he does. Okay. And he'll go through it again. So that's the thing that gets to me, that these people put themselves in these positions. And then they think, oh, well, I put myself in this position. I go into court and I can beat it. But when you don't have the evidence done by them, you don't have the evidence to win a court case. And that's the point. You don't really want to go to court. You don't want to argue this crap in front of a judge because he's going to tell you, you lose. So sorry. So sad. It really works that way. These men and women do not care for you. As soon as you comprehend that, you think you're going to go in front of a judge and the judge is supposed to know the law and he's supposed to defend you and he's supposed to do this and that, you start realizing really quickly when a judge sits there and goes, you go to jail for 6 months. Or 30 days, or 2 days, 24 hours to go cool off. You know? And I've had them do that. You know, oh, you're going to go to jail for 24 hours to cool off. And I'm like, oh, that's bullshit. But, you know, what am I going to do? Argue? Of course, I got released a couple hours later, but then I had to go back and redo the case. I had to go back and redo what I originally did. And then when I went back in front of the judge and the administrative court judge, and he looked at what I did, and he goes, oh, you cooled off. You actually got it done correctly. Have a good day. No more argument. No more nothing. But these guys are not going to sit there and fight with you and have an argument with you and do this stuff. They want to go home. They don't want to sit there and be in front of them doing all this stuff. Most of them do. And a lot of them don't give a damn. They really don't give a damn. And as soon as you start comprehending that these men and women don't give a damn, and they're going to make money off of your birth certificate or your plantation number or whatever you want to call it, and it's like, you can get off the plantation, do it. It's your responsibility, not God's. And when you find God that works on that, let me know. That's the one thing, you know, I mean, I know that when people go in and they file their paperwork correctly and they do it right, things are dismissed, things are gone, things happen. But it is doing it correctly. And that is the point, the whole point about the education that we try to do is to do it correctly. Not to be negative, not to go out there, you know. Oh, anyhow, I apologize. Let me open up the floor again. I got a little rampaging that from the deal. Go ahead. The floor is open. Did you let him in?
It looked like he was trying to talk, but he might have just been talking in the background. But it is open, so anybody who tried to talk previously, minus the one I kicked because he wouldn't shut up.
Yeah.
And he is going to be kicked from now on.
Go ahead. Where's yours?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully we didn't get him upset.
I hope so also. I mean, I hope we didn't piss anybody else off.
I got rambled on with him again, and that's the last time.
Yeah, that individual, that slave, basically, is not going to be allowed to talk on this show ever again.
No. Anyhow, I hope we didn't get him upset. And so I apologize. I got on a rampage because I got really pissed off with Ronald again. I get tired of him, you know, when you give him solutions and he doesn't want to deal with them. He wants to argue instead of going through it. So, is he still on the line at all?
Oh, yeah. The only one that's left is the one I kicked. Other than that, if nobody else is going to say anything, we can shut the show down and everybody can go do their Sunday evening drinking, whatever they want to do.
Ready for Monday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I apologize publicly to the one man who wanted to speak, and I just got rambled on, and I apologize for that one. I just want to make sure he knows I'm doing a personal apology to him, because I didn't mean to do that. So, we'll give him another minute, see if he wants to jump in, and if not, we'll call it a night. And for the others, yes, you're welcome. That was getting to a point where I was getting really frustrated when, you know, we had a couple other people wanted to talk, and he just started going on and on and on and on. And we've been through this several times before. We told him we'll give him another chance to show some respect, and then when he's given the floor up and then he goes off on another tangent, it's frustrating. And I don't like it because then I went off on a tangent, and I got people probably angry for me for my tangent, and I guess that's what the project was, to get me going, so that way it happened the way it happened. So anyhow, if nobody else wants to speak up, I guess we'll go ahead and call it an evening. We won't have another night like this one because we're not going to go through that again. You know, because the whole thing is supposed to be respect and honor. So, anyhow, with that, may the Great Spirit walk with you, bless you. May Mother Earth look over you, feed you, take care of your children. And may the Creator take care of all of us. You all have a peaceful evening.
Thank you, Ed. Well, it is Education by Ed. And, well, as you saw tonight, this is one of the reasons why Ed has a producer. So Ed can keep on doing the things he does. And the producer can handle the rowdy children, the unruly brats that decide that they want to make Ed's show into their show. Now, we are trying to build a community of thinkers that respect others' ideas and are willing to act on the information that we provide, but we do not instruct, we do not tell, we do not order. We just give out the information. How you use it or not use it is up to you, and you are liable for any information provided whatsoever by the show or by the website. Other than that, I would like to thank everyone for no, Dave. No, this is not the Ed Springer Show. Hell no.
What do you mean?
Just the YouTube chat.
Don't get into it.
It's on there. It's on there. Yeah, I have the chat on the video. Anyways, effectively, we want to thank everybody for joining in and listening and being respectful, being a living man and not one of the automatron persons that the corporation pretty much controls. So with that, I'm going to thank everybody, and Ed and I both wish you a wonderful week, and we'll catch you Saturday with Disclaimers by Ed Johnston, where he's going to have another bunch of information, so get your notepads ready. And well, we already know one classmate failed on his homework, and he was banned from school. Thank you very much, and have a very good week.
This session is no longer being recorded.